In this video lesson, we're going to be looking at the basics of creating media for the purpose of media casting. So here we're just going to get a general overview of how the process works. So the basic process of creating media presentations, and here we're really going to be looking at creating video or even just creating audio presentations, is going to consist of these 4 steps. Now the first step is capturing our content. So that's where we're using some sort of hardware or software to actually capture that media. The second step is then going to be taking that media and editing it. That's going to consist of changing it or adding anything extra to it, polishing it up, maybe taking away pieces that we don't want, and really getting it to the way that we want it to look. The third step is then going to be producing or converting that edited piece of media into a file format that we are able to share. And then the fourth step is the actual sharing of that, actually delivering that media to our audience. So now we're just going to look at each of these steps in a little bit more detail. Now the first step, the capture step, is of course a really important one. And there are 2 scenarios here that are probably going to be the most common that you're going to encounter. The first one is capturing video along with audio. And a few ways that you could do that are, number 1, you could use your cell phone. There's a lot of smartphones out there these days that have really great cameras. A lot of them have HD cameras. So those are really quick, easy to use, and good looking ways to capture video. Video cameras, handheld cameras, are also another option, as are webcams. Most laptops have webcams built into them these days, or you can have an external USB webcam. And all of those options will also be able to just capture audio. If you just want to capture audio, you can do that with those as well. Now the other scenario is if you are capturing your screen along with audio. So in this case, you are going to be using some sort of software. Maybe it's Camtasia, maybe it's Jing, it could be Screencast. These are all options for pieces of software that will capture what's happening on your screen and also capture audio along with that to create a presentation. And you could use those pieces of software to just capture audio if you wanted to do that as well. So here we're going to be looking at some best practices for capturing our content. And this, of course, could take up a whole training session just in and of itself. But we're going to be looking at kind of some basic, really important ones. The first 2 or 3 actually have to do with audio. And audio is sometimes overlooked, but it's a really important part of creating a presentation. So the first one is checking your audio source. And whenever you're using some sort of software to capture your screen or maybe capture something from a webcam, there's going to be a way to set your audio source. And what that means is you're setting and telling your computer what device it's using to record the audio. So most laptops and a lot of computers have a built-in microphone somewhere. You could also have purchased an external USB microphone. So you may have a couple of different sources there, and you need to make sure that the software knows that it's recording from the right one. If you're using something like a cell phone or a handheld camera or some piece of hardware, there's probably not necessarily going to be a way to do that. So you may not have to worry about it there. This is more going to be if you're using some sort of software. Now, the second one is checking your audio levels. And really what this is doing is making sure that your software is recording at the correct volume. So when you look over here at this image, you see this bar with some colors in it. And this is a feature that is common to pretty much any piece of software that records audio. And it's called a level meter or an audio meter. And what it's doing is it has colors that are representing the level at which your audio is coming in. So if your audio is relatively low, it'll just be in the green. And as it gets higher, it will go into the yellow, the orange, and even the red. Now the reason that this is really important is because if your audio is going all the way into the red or all the way to the top of your meter, because it may not have colors, if it's going all the way to the top, there's a potential for it to clip. And clipping is a really important term. What clipping means is that your audio is being recorded at such a high volume that your software or your hardware is unable to capture it correctly, and it's going to end up being distorted when you play it back. So likewise, if your audio is really low, if it's down at the bottom end, it could be so low that there's going to be just a whole bunch of extra noise. So too low, too high, either way it's going to sound really bad. So we want to try and get it somewhere in the middle so we're getting a good level. Now again, this is more going to be for if you're using software. If you're using like your cell phone, for example, to record a video and some audio, there's not necessarily going to be a way to adjust your audio levels there. If you're using a handheld camera, there may not be a way to do it because it's generally doing it automatically for you. Now the third one is to be aware of background noise. So this is just making sure that there's not some loud white noise going on in the background. You know, your TV's not on, there aren't, you know, your kids aren't running around and making noise. Anything in the background that could be distracting. And that's going to, of course, you know, detract from the quality of your video if you have some distracting background noise. Now, just going along with that, you also want to be aware of what your camera or your screen capture is going to see. Is there anything behind me in my camera's shot that's going to be distracting? Or on my computer's screen, let's say I'm capturing my desktop, for example, are there any files out there that are personal files that I may not want my students to see? What is my desktop image? Is that something that I want to have up in my video? When I open up my browser, what kinds of bookmarks are showing that may have personal information on them? Those are just things that you want to be aware of. What is my camera going to see, and what is my screen capture going to see when I actually start recording? And finally, always do a test first, because a test is the best way to check and make sure that all of these things are set correctly. Because you can record that test and play it back, and you can see and hear exactly what it's going to look and sound like. And then you have the opportunity there to say, oh, I wasn't recording from the right source because that doesn't sound right. Or my volume was way too high. It sounds really bad. Or there's this thing in the background that looks weird. There's this weird picture or whatever in the background. And that gives you the opportunity to go back and make those changes before you do your whole presentation. So once we've actually captured our content, the next step is editing. So in editing, the first part of this here is making changes to the video, cutting out any unwanted portions. And we're not going to get really in depth here right now. Just know that that's kind of what this consists of, and that there are lots of different options for that. You can use things like iMovie, Windows Movie Maker, Camtasia, or there are some higher end professional video programs that you can use to do that. The second part of this is creating captions. And this is really important because if you remember what we talked about in the ADA section of this first week here, we talked about the fact that we have to have captions for our video. It's not an option. So we have to make sure that our video is accessible. So if we're doing that, we're going to be using something like Camtasia perhaps, or we could use YouTube's automatic transcription feature. And there are also lots of other free web-based captioning applications. There's a lot of options out there. And we're going to look at a specific one in a later lesson, but just know that there are lots of options to do that. Now, if you are just creating an audio file, you obviously can't have captions with that because there's no video. In that case, you can just create a transcript, which is just a written version of it that you'll post with it. If it's a video, it does have to have the captions that are synced to the video that appear at the correct times. A transcript is not an acceptable substitute for captions if it's a video. But if it's just audio, transcript will work. Now, in the third step here, we are taking our edited, captioned video or our finished audio file, and we are now producing it into a format that our delivery method is going to accept. And in our case, our delivery, our sharing method is the media site. So these are the video and audio formats that the media site will accept. Video formats, we have AVI, MP4, M4V, MPG or MPEG, MPEG format, and then MOV format. So there's a lot of variety of different formats you can use there. Audio formats, there's WAV, AIF, or AIFF. There's AAC, M4A, and MP3. So that's pretty much most of the audio formats that you're going to be running into. And then finally there's also a 500 megabyte limit per upload. So each file that you upload can be a maximum of 500 megabytes. So how are we doing this conversion or this production process? Now, if you're editing in software and maybe you even did your captions in that software, you could just be exporting straight out of that software into one of those formats. and into a file size that is under 500 megabytes. And that's great. That's a really easy way to do it. Then you're just ready to go. But you may have exported out of your editing software, or you may have added your captions on, and now you still need to get it into one of these formats and under 500 megabytes. So in that case, you could use a standalone conversion tool. One option is any video converter, which is a free Mac or PC conversion tool. Also, onlineconvert.com is a website that's web-based, so you just upload your video there and it converts it for you and then spits it back out in the selected video or audio format. So those are a couple options that you can use to do that. And then once you've got it into the correct format that the media site will accept, and it's the right size, you'll upload it to the media server using the media site, and then you'll share it in your D2L course by copying and pasting that link. And we're of course going to go over that in a little bit more detail in a later lesson, but that is the general basic process and some best practices for creating media.